Well, hello, everyone, from the great group of Michigan innkeepers, the best in all the land. And this is our final webinar of our webinar series for 2024. And we have a very special guest who is also one of us, a member of the Michigan Bed and Breakfast Association, Chris and Jenna Simpler. They own the Cartier Mansion and the Ludington House, both in Ludington, Michigan. He's going to talk to us about financial terms, ADR, RevPAR, all these things that we should know, but we don't know. And we like to tell people we know, but we really don't know. So it's really good that you're here to tell us so that we can honestly say, oh, yeah, I know what that is. So, Chris, it's all yours.
All right. Thank you, Ken. Hi, everybody. I know a lot of people are watching this as a recording, so try to keep it fun and light. And Donna, feel free to share my contact info if anybody wants a follow-up, one-on-one, whatever, clarification, always happy to do that. So, well, let's start today and talk about who is this presentation for, and I should probably share my screen to do that. So let's jump in here. And I think, the easy answer is if you've got too much money to spend, you don't have any concerns about an exit strategy in the future, go ahead and just fast forward to the end when I give you the winning lottery numbers. Go roll around in your pile of $100 bills and sip your fine champagne, and the rest of us will just keep working. But I know the reality is for most independent innkeepers, really all business owners, short and long-term profitability, making good decisions around spending, and a healthy exit strategy are or should be top priorities. And in my experience, there's 2.5 things that get in the way of that. First off, we are not, I'm not a gentleman farmer here. There are more demands for my time than there are hours in the day. Constantly something buzzing on your phone or literally showing up at your door, or water lines doing what they do. So that can quickly get in front of you, and paying attention to the details can be tricky. The other side is knowing what to measure can be daunting, even if you have a financial background, because there's a huge difference between academic and practical. And some of the stuff that's out there kind of makes sense for what we do, and some of it maybe doesn't, or you need to modify it to make it work, okay? For those of you who are paying attention, I said 2.5 things. The half thing is being able to get data that you can trust, all right? I use ResNexus. I'm a little bit familiar with Think. I know other people are on different systems, and you have to take the time, invest yourself into learning your property management system well enough that you know when something's wrong, so that you can start to trust it. Okay, it's like driving your car. You don't know quite how it works until you really get your hands on there. So if you are only looking at reports once in a while, or you're just blindly running with them, you're never going to really be able to get to this point of arrival we're going to talk to. So and frankly, that may be a whole training session that could last a week in itself to figure out some of these things. So why me? Well, that was the first slide there. Geez, I jumped right over it. Why are we doing this? Let's make some money. Thank you, Danny DeVito, one of my favorite guys here. But why me? Let me talk a little bit about my background. So for close to 20 years now, I've been in personal finance. I was National Director for Training and Development for MetLife. I've been a Series 7, 66, 24, FINRA, SEC registered kind of guy. I did all this. And I always found that I enjoyed making unnecessarily complex topics easy for people to figure out. And so I've also taught community college classes in finance, economics, and accounting. And that is going to be a big chunk of what we do here, because it's going to help us come back to, why do you even need to do this in the first place? As long as you're paying your bills and doing whatever, who cares? Well, the answer is it will help you back to, the dollar bills and making some more money. and also give you some peace of mind about how you're making decisions. It's going to add some tools to your tool chest for that. The two guideposts we're going to start with come from the world of accounting. They're things you probably know, and we're not going to spend a lot of time here. But before we get into the ADRs and RevPARs and whatnots, you got to know that there's two major components that we're going to work with. The first one is your cash flow. Your cash flow is the money in, the money out. And I'll tell you a quick side story here. When I was in finance, personal finance originally, I remember, I was new, I was green, and had this couple that came into our office, two attorneys in downtown Chicago making $600,000 a year. Man, I was just blown away. Whoa, 600 grand a year. These people are so wealthy. They're so great. We started doing their analysis and discovered they were spending about $610,000 a year. And I remember pretty quickly thereafter, I was introduced to a family that lived north of town. He worked for Abbott Laboratories as an engineer, made good money, but not ridiculous money. Wife was a school teacher. And these folks were saving about $50,000 a year. And they were making a fraction of what that other couple was. But, cash flow, and then when we get to balance sheet, tell all your secrets, okay? And I think in our business, sometimes we have this, size matters stigma. And for those of you who are watching and doing the follow-up, I think it's a nice reminder to say, you can do a perfectly lovely job and make a lot of money with a 5-6 room inn. Bigger isn't necessarily better. I've met lots of innkeepers who can run an efficient shop at 5 rooms and put a lot of money to the bottom line and have a nice lifestyle. And I've met a lot of people who have 150, 200 rooms across multiple properties, and they're always scrambling to pay their bills. So cash flow and balance sheet are going to help reveal a little bit of that, and we're going to talk more. So cash flow, let's get academic for a half second. This is a period of time, and we're going to talk about how you measure when you measure. Here, quick show of hands from the two people on camera here. I'll go off. How many people here have really great Julys? Relatively speaking, is July like the best month of the year for you?
No,
what's your
not
best
July, June.
June, okay, June. What's your worst month since you're off mute?
Mine was January.
Perfect.
Mine's January as well.
There you go, right? So when you talk about cash flow, the error many people make, not just in finance, but in life in general, is your measurement bias. What are you measuring? Would you want me or a banker or a buyer to judge your business off of one day in January? Of course not. Conversely, you got to find a real sucker who's going to judge your business off of one day in July or 1 week in July or June, right? So when we talk about cash flow, we are talking about a period of time. And if we're being honest with ourselves, we're going to pick an accurate period of time. One of my pet peeves, and as Michiganders will all know this, is when people will be like, well, I love it, but man, winters are tough. Well, what did you think? Well, did you seriously expect you were going to have Januaries that look like Julys? Are you building your budget around the 3 best months, right? So you have to learn what is the accurate measurement. Quarterly, semi-annual, annual. Maybe in certain cases it's multiple years. Maybe you live in an area that every 2 years there's a big event. Rewire to think about when your cash flow is going to help you make decisions. Okay, because we're going to come back to that some more here in a second. Next up, we're going to talk about the balance sheet. I mentioned those folks there in Chicago, and the balance sheet is a point in time. And so if in January you are you start the year with $100,000 on your balance sheet, and you end the year with $150,000, just using some even numbers, that means that if you go back to your cash flow sheet, that should show that you have $50,000. Now, if those numbers don't mesh, right? If cash flow doesn't say plus 50 and then your balance sheet doesn't reflect plus 50, you got to get a new accountant. Now, I'm not going to talk about some of the depreciation and taxes and all those pieces. And I will say this, people like to get more creative than they need to. And I want to rewind back to the first, why are we even talking about this? Better decision making, more money in your pocket, and ultimately a better exit strategy. One of my personal missions over the next several years is to help transform this industry from a real estate industry into actually being treated like a business. I think that is the greatest disservice we have in the bed and breakfast world, is that basically you want to buy a bed and breakfast, well, your spouse better be working a full-time job and able to afford the mortgage, because they're going to give you a 30-year residential, not a 20-year commercial, and they don't treat the cash flow from the B&B as seriously as they should. Granted, there are exceptions, but that is overwhelmingly how people get in here. Well, that's a ridiculously high barrier of entry for people in their 20s and 30s who would make perfectly good innkeepers and help with some of our aging population who wants to exit. So we could have a win-win if we did it. But the first step is we've got to have better financials. Because if we can't go to a credit union or a bank and say, here's my actual numbers, not some made up nonsense, we may as well just sell houses. So cash flow, balance sheet, and then to kind of drive my point here, the monkey business, the measurement period bias, oh, well, let me tell you about my great June, my great July, is not going to get us anywhere. You ain't fooling anyone. Let it go. Because ultimately, your long-term net worth and financial health is going to come from having good data. So my agenda for you today is to please be able to have the confidence in your data, have accuracy in your data, that you can use it to make decisions and improve your overall situation. Sound fair? Okay, there you go. 13-minute intro. Let's keep rolling. So the first thing is revenue. What is revenue? You feel like people would know what revenue is, but I've heard all sorts of versions of this. Revenue is not your profit. I would say for our purposes of authentic reporting, revenue is what actually comes in the door from what you are selling. Okay, I've had people suggest that their revenue was, somehow related to who the heck was it? It was a Louisiana person, had a B&B or a Airbnb, I think it was. And I said, the numbers didn't work out. And I said, how are you possibly making money doing this? And come to, dig in some more. And they had some oil rights or some junk like that was kicking off, enough to support it. So that's not your revenue. Sure, it's income, but that's not honest revenue. So back to, man behind the curtain here, be honest with yourself. What are you selling? And that is your revenue. If you're playing games where, oh, well, I've got a family trust or an inheritance, or I've got dividends from my investments and I'm counting that towards my revenue or my retirement, that's not an accurate take on things. And, I get it. Everyone's got their own personal reason for doing it, but you have to scrape away from that. Let's cut out what is your revenue. If you can answer that confidently, that's a great first step. Okay. Next, I want to go to our friends up in Mackinac and talk about fudge. We're going to do a little bit of math. So Ken and Jan, I'm going to put you on the spot here. I'll take the middle one because it's the toughest math. Ken, 2 divided by 8, what's that percentage? He's on mute, but I know he's saying 25%. Right, 25%. I'm gonna write on the screen here so you can all make fun of my terrible writing.
25%.
There you go. I said I'd take the middle one because I don't want anyone to be embarrassed. So 33%. And Jan, last but
50.
50%. Beautiful. Why is fudge and why does this matter? What the heck are you talking about, Chris? Well, here's the thing. If you talk about ADR, and I got to clear my annotations here. We talk about taking the total, sorry, I jumped ahead here. I mean, occupancy. If we're talking about occupancy, I hear a lot of times people will use that as their North Star. That's their one thing that they want to get into is occupancy. And occupancy by definition, so this is one of our first concepts here, occupancy is the total number of room nights sold divided by the room nights available. Sounds really easy, right? Like, oh, no kidding, Chris. Thanks for telling me nothing. Except, how accurate is your room nights available? How good are you about taking rooms out of service when they're actually out of service and putting them back into service when they're done? How many people will take 3 or 4 day block because they don't want to accidentally sell the room because they got to change a valve on a toilet, but you just happen to leave those 3 days off because they're not going to sell anyway. It's January. Anyone ever done that? I'm not asking, since we only have 2 people on the call, I won't ask for people to raise their hands. We've all done it. We know it, right? That screws up your data. And 2 divided by 8. Hey, Donna. We'll get Donna in here. Donna's going to join and see 2. I'm going to do this here. Donna, I'm glad you're joining. You get to see this ridiculous slideshow here that says 2 divided by 8. You're like, what kind of class is this? And I will get brief rewind for you, but then we're going to keep rolling. We're talking about occupancy and how important it is. Occupancy is rooms sold divided by rooms available, but we don't do a great job of accurately portraying rooms available. And without doing that, we don't have great data. Without great data, we can't make great decisions. So the first call to action today is going to be, think about your availability and how you do it. If a room could be sold, that counts as available. Not, I didn't feel like cleaning it today, so I'm going to take it out of service. Get your butt up there and turn that room, okay? If you know, well, no one's going to come anyway because it's January, like I said. Nope, that doesn't count, all right? And we all have, we've all done it. We're all guilty to some degree or another. But if we're going to talk about this from a concept and data, we have to use those service blocks correctly. There is another concept here that is a subset of occupancy, which is going to be our stays. I wanted to think about stays a little bit for a second here. You may be a type of business. So do any of you have like long-term stays, like a cabin or something like that, where people are typically renting it for a week?
I don't.
I do.
Okay, Jen does. So average nights, and a lot of these data points, this is like, I love people who, especially athletes, will say, I don't need to run faster than Ken. He's on this side of me actually, but I just need to run faster than I did yesterday, right? I need to be better than myself. And so occupancy is a great one of the example for that. Average stay is a great example of that too. Don't worry about, you know, Donna versus Jan. Well, I have an average of 2.5 nights. Well, I have an average of 4.5 nights. It may not actually be right for your business, okay? You might be leaving money on the table because an average stay that's longer, generally those guests want to have a lower ADR, right? Because, hey, I'm buying in bulk. I want to get a little bit of a discount, you know? So be aware of that. It's not, a lot of these metrics are going to be internally driven, but that average stay is not occupancy. And if you're measuring stays as instead of nights, you could find some bad data there as well. So make sure you're measuring the right thing. How many nights do you have available total? I have 10 rooms here at Cartier. Easy math. 10 times 365, 3,650 nights available. Back out any service blocks that I have to do, and that's my actual rooms available. Next up, we're going to talk about ADR. This is widely used in the industry, and a lot of people like to, play that game of, how does your ADR look to mine? Or you'll hear people talk about, yeah, well, I moved my ADR up last year by, $10, whatever. It is widely used in the industry. It is basically, the math on it is pretty straightforward. Total revenue divided by rooms sold, room nights sold. I find that it's not necessarily that helpful in comparing. It is helpful in comparing hotels of similar types. Okay, so you have to, as a business owner, as a hotel owner, innkeeper, you have to know what your comp set is. Okay, and that is very subjective. So are Jan and I doing the same thing? Are Donna and I doing the same thing? Are we serving the same population with roughly the same market financial dynamics, right? Is the average restaurant, that's a good thing, like the Big Mac index, if you want to call it that, right? If you go out to eat in Ludington and 2 adults eat at a typical restaurant and you get some, your regular meals kind of middle of the road on the menu, what are you going to spend? If that's more or less the same as what Jan is going to spend, then that's probably a fair comparison. And comparing my ADR to hers, okay, that would be okay. But Jenna and I, we just traveled. We were just in Zurich, and we were in Barcelona, Lyon, and Zurich, right? I bet you can just guess, if you've never even been there, how expensive Zurich is. I mean, literally, the first night we were there, I was just looking for some dinner and looked at the menus for a burger joint. We'll just call it that. It wasn't quite it's in Switzerland, so I don't know, a burger joint, right? Has the dots over the U. And it was like $80. I mean, it would have been for 2, not even for drinks. And I was like, that can't be right. So I said, well, that place is way too nice. We need to go look at the cheap places. We went to the cheap places. They were 70. I said, okay, never mind. I guess that's what it is. And sure enough, that's the difference. But the point here is you got to compare apples to apples with ADR. All right. Don't be intimidated by somebody whose ADR is different. You can look at your own ADR, but you have to be thoughtful about inflation, right? If you're using 5% inflation and you say, well, my ADR last year was 100 and this year it's 105, well, congratulations, you've done nothing. You might be slipping. If you've been running your inn for many years and you do track this kind of stuff, first of all, good for you. Not sarcastic, good for you. That's a huge thing. Most people do a horrendous job of keeping long-term records. Back to one of the overarching concepts of being able to sell your place at a premium. But if you have been tracking your ADR, so maybe you've been in the business 10 years, say, well, in 2014, my ADR was 150, and here I am 10 years later, and it's 175, you probably don't want to hear me say you've lost ground if you account for inflation. So again, be truthful to yourself about it. And the last point we're going to make before we move on here is ADR and occupancy work on opposite sides of the seesaw. So Donna, I bet you're excited to join the economics class here. I mentioned early on, I teach macroeconomics at the community college level. And if I only accomplish one thing with those students in the semester of macroeconomics, it is to understand the difference between moving along the demand curve and shifting the demand curve. So I'm going to attempt to do with you fine folks in about 4 minutes what I do with them over a whole semester. Here's what we've got. Let me pull up my pointer here. On the left-hand side, you've got your occupancy rate. These are arbitrary numbers. It's the concept we're going for. So on this side, we've got occupancy, our percentage. On this side, we've got on the x-axis, we've got our average daily revenue, ADR, $100, $150, et cetera, again, just for illustration. This point here, this green guy, this is just a random point along the line I grabbed, okay? Doesn't really mean anything. But what you're reading here is at let's call it 45% occupancy, I'm getting about 130, 140 bucks average daily revenue. Make sense? If I raise my rates, all things being equal, you know, maybe you remember this Latin from when once upon a time, if you took ceteris paribus, all right, that's Latin for all things being equal. If you don't do anything and you raise your rates, you can expect your occupancy to drop. And I ran the number on this. Where did I put the numbers? If you do that, in this example, just having a little bit of a fun piece, you'd actually lose money. You'd actually lose money. So, hey, my ADR went up. But, I mean, you could do it if you want to on the back of an envelope. 175. I mean, we actually can do it very quickly because we don't even have to account for rooms. 175 times 0.25 is 43. And 140 times 0.45 is 63. The reason I'm sharing this and the point I want to really drive home is that this mistake is one that most innkeepers make. I want to drive occupancy. Well, if you're doing so at the expense of ADR, so you've improved your occupancy, congratulations, but you lowered your rates to do it? Maybe not. Do the math there. Which are you actually making less money? Or vice versa, I want to raise my ADR, but now I've lost occupancy. What you really want to do is you want to shift the curve. Because now if you're keeping your occupancy at 50% and you're moving your ADR from 125 to 175, well, we don't need to pull out the calculator to figure that one out. You are making more money. Okay, so again, back to just to take a second and pause if you have any questions or comments you want to throw in there. I would argue that this is probably the biggest mistake people make. Picking one, and then that seesaw just moves. And now you're 10 years down the line and you go, I never made any progress. Thoughts on that?
Can you go back to the graph for me, please?
Yes, ma'am. This one or the one before?
This one.
Okay.
So you're saying shift it.
Yes.
So how do you shift it?
Yep. So you shift it through, there's a variety of ways that you shift a demand curve. We'll jump into it, but let me throw out a couple of ideas. Generally, if you go and you say, you know, demand curve shift, you'll find it like market dynamics and a lot of different things. And remember, it's not changing price. The price changes because you've changed demand, not the other way around. So what can you do? You can do some improvements. So you can either do actual improvements or market those improvements so that people can know what's going on.
So added value is what you're talking.
Added value, absolutely. You can change your focus a little to look and see what is, when people say, well, what's in demand? I'm not recommending this by any stretch, but we have a friend who was out in Galena, Illinois. When they first signed with recreational marijuana, they said, well, that's obviously really in demand. They built a smoker's shed out back. And people come and get high out there at whatever the place is called. That is literally addressing the demand. That's what this graph says. So that's one of those days where sit back, adult beverage if you want, and say, what is it people are looking for? This can sometimes take a little bit of soul searching and bearing your soul, not soul searching. Being vulnerable with people you trust or even people you don't know that well. You know, what could I do better? You know, hey, get rid of the doilies and the creepy dolls. How many years did we have those in B&Bs? And we took a lot of people took some, maybe DVD players aren't as impressive as you think they are. And let me show you my collection of 1980s, Pauly Shore hits. No. So what is the traveler looking for? That's going to move the demand curve. What are people demanding is moving the curve, okay? Great question. But the key here is if you're trading one for the other, you got to be careful to not pat yourself on the back too much because all you're doing is getting right back where you started. There is another metric that we'll talk about. Great question, Donna. And I've actually got a few more examples here that we'll come to. So the holy grail, or some would lead you to believe, of financial metrics is RevPAR, revenue per available room. You can calculate this. I got to go back. I can't keep looking at Dwight doing this here. You can calculate this in one of two ways. So RevPAR is basically adjusting for occupancy. So what is your average daily revenue, total revenue divided by rooms sold? So I have $100,000. I sold 100 rooms. That means I sold 1,000 rooms. That means I made $100 times occupancy is going to get you your RevPAR. A lot of people like to use RevPAR as that comparative thing. Remember, I said ADR can be a little bit of an unfair, you have to be apples to apples for it to be valuable. RevPAR, you'll hear arguments that, oh, well, RevPAR is the great equalizer. It's the holy grail. It tells the real story as to what the business is doing. Maybe. The good news is it typically works in our advantage when we are selling a premium experience, when we're selling something better than a hotel chain. You tend to see RevPAR work in your favor when you're delivering a premium product, right? Or experience, better term. So I had a 61 room hotel in Pennsylvania, a typical Best Western type of deal, $99 ADR. And remember, because ADR doesn't account for all my rooms available, right? It has no occupancy component to it. So that was my rate. Like I was a $99 highway hotel, basically. I think we were at 106, but for our purposes. But even at 70% occupancy, if you do that math, right, 170%, you're basically at 70. My RevPAR was 68, 70, right? In a B&B environment, you could run $150 ADR, right? I don't know, a lot of people are running rates much lower than that. Maybe you have a room or two that's, $125, whatever it is. But $150 ADR at a 50%, so a lower occupancy, you can do the math, right? 150 times 50%, 75. So you can actually start to see some of the advantage of RevPAR as a comparative measure. And RevPAR tends to be an indication of the premium that you're selling, whether or not it's a good experience for it. Is there any questions or thoughts on that? Because I think RevPAR gets a lot of talk, and I think it gets a lot more credit than it does, but let's talk it out if need be.
So to calculate it, it's ADR times occupancy?
That's one way to do it. You can do ADR times occupancy, or you can do total revenue divided by available rooms, right? It's 6 of one, half dozen.
Okay.
But you notice, Ken, great question, right back to the thing that I hammered hard early on. You got to have good data about your available rooms. Because if you're fudging, and we'll go back to this guy here, right? If you're telling me you only had 4 rooms available, your RevPAR is going to look fantastic. But if you forgot to click that button to make those rooms available because you actually changed that toilet valve on Monday instead of Thursday, oh. I will also suggest that it's not just clicking the button. One of the things that the partner we had in Pennsylvania, our triage list for doing work, and it was kind of like, get those rooms open. And this is a tail wagging the dog kind of thing, because sometimes people will say, well, I had great occupancy, I had great RevPAR, because RevPAR is a derivative of occupancy, but they closed Tuesday through Thursday. Okay, well, if I could cherry pick the days I was open, of course I'm going to have great occupancy. You know what? I could have 100% occupancy if I was only open on the days when I had business, but how would I know? Right? So a lot of this is kind of like, you've got to be honest with yourself. And I'm going to say it for the 10th time, maybe 11th, because the buyers and the bankers are going to see through your funny business, right? And savvy buyers who are buying a business and not a piece of real estate, the first thing they're going to say is, cool, how many nights were you available last year? Oh, wow, that RevPAR looks great. What was your occupancy? You had 70% occupancy? Wow, I've never seen someone with 70% occupancy in this region. How'd you pull that off? Oh, you were only open on Fridays and Saturdays. Oh, any idiot can do that, right? You know, if I only had to pay my mortgage 2 days a week, life would be great. So, Donna, you got a question?
Well, so what you're saying is if you have 5 rooms times 365 days out of a year, that's the number we're looking at.
That would be the most for sure. You're going to have a natural pullback because there are going to be nights that you're closed, you're doing maintenance and so on and so forth. But
Or
if
if we
that
go on vacation or
yeah, sure. Like there's a normal amount. No, absolutely. When you see like, so 10, I just use 10 because it's an easy number, 3,650 room nights. If I was trying to sell this place, if I was the buyer on the other side of the Cartier deal and room availability was less than 90%, I would immediately go, wonder what's going on there. Is this a seasonal business? Did you really need, you know, more than a month off on vacation? All right. And there will be seasonal models. There's going to be people listening to this say, well, that Chris Simpler is an idiot. He doesn't know what he's talking about. They're right, but that's fine. The point is, you know, you have to have honest data if you expect to be treated like an actual business, you know, seller, right? And you want to be able to stand behind it. And that room's available. Again, RevPAR is great, but I can fudge my ADR. I can fudge my occupancy. I can fudge my RevPAR if I want to. A savvy buyer will see right through it. So you're better off doing it. And the sooner you can start getting that data, the better you'll be. If you can have 2-3 years of really good data that you say, I will die on this hill, you can bet you're going to go to market with a nice product and get top dollar for your business. All right, let's keep rolling. Let's talk about when is 100% not 100%. And I'm going to just, I kind of blew it. I put the message on the screen already here. So what do I mean by this? When we first got it to Michigan, Jenna's old boss is a high-level hotel executive, been running big stuff, big luxury hotels all around the world. He said, how's it going? She goes, it's going great. He goes, how's your occupancy? She goes, oh, we're at like 100% occupancy. He goes, you need to raise your prices. He goes, you shouldn't be at 100% occupancy. That's a sucker's game. And here's what he meant in a loving way. Occupancy and rate is on a seesaw. I don't know how high my rates could go if my occupancy is at 100%. Think about not percentage, but units. And go back to the economic, the demand curve for a second. If I charged $50 a night, how many rooms could I sell in the city of Ludington? Not what percentage. Sorry, Donna, go ahead.
probably quite a few.
Yeah, right. I could probably sell, hell, people would drive from all over Michigan if they knew they could get a $50 room night. I could probably sell 5,000 rooms at $50 a night. But because I only have 10 rooms and I use percentage, I go, well, I'm at 100% occupancy. So you got to rethink it, think like that supply and demand curve, right? Economics. How many units could I sell that? The problem with our reports and our percentages is it stops at 100. It doesn't tell me, hey, you could have sold 120% of your rooms. You could have sold 200% at that rate. So yeah, we had the AI take up, right? So we have technology that tries to figure for that. In the meantime, there's a really easy way to do it. And it actually kind of makes operations better. Don't target 100, target 90. And then guess what? When you have an air conditioner go out in the middle of July, you're not, you don't have no place to put somebody or whatever. Of course, there's going to be sellout nights. Thank God, I got a bunch of them sooner than I expected this year. But the reality is, if you're always sold out, you have no way of knowing where you can go with price. So if you're throttling right around 95% during the busy time of year, that's okay. Like, and again, that rarely happens. Like, that's July, we push about 80, 85 total occupancy. And you got to figure there's natural stuff, like a room may not be available on a particular night that somebody needs it. So that's the other reason why 90, 95 is probably a good target anyway, because you're just not going to get there unless your prices are too low. You talk about shifting the curve. That's a great short answer, is that yes, we're talking about the seesaw still, right? You're talking about moving on the curve, but this is one of those where you're going to exclude people who aren't willing to pay the lower amount. That is actually a demand curve shift for you. You're changing your target audience. That's okay. We made a conscious decision with our property and the type of product we're selling that when I go to booking.com and I sort lowest to highest, Cartier Mansion needs to be at the bottom of that list by about 25%. So whatever the next cheapest property is in Ludington, I want to be about 25% more. I've shifted that curve. Now I will adjust things along that curve in order to help, find the sweet spot. Next thing on the list here is fixed variable costs, revenue, and profit. And the highlight I want to bring up here is you have fixed costs. Thinking about your measurement period, probably over the course of a year, just for ease, what are those fixed costs? Your variable costs are things like your labor, if you pay housekeepers to do it, your room amenities, your food costs, marginal utilities. That may be a little bit trickier to figure out, but meaning if nobody's in the house, what does your water bill look like? If you got a full house, what's your water bill look like? You should have those data points somewhere. So your mortgage, your property taxes, a handful of other things, those are going to be your fixed costs, right? Your variable, utilities, labor, food, and so forth, supplies, amenities. Those two together, so you take your revenue, the yellow line, minus your costs, that's your profit. And you can see here, your profit's not so great early on. Now this illustration is really just a visual. What I want you to notice is this area here. See how it's getting bigger? That's the key. The slope of these lines is where the magic happens. And so now I'm going to kind of eat my own words, because I said, well, ADR and occupancy and maybe this and that and the other, which do you focus on? There may be some wisdom to strictly driving your revenue. Just go for it. If it doesn't change the curve of your variable costs. Let me go back to the slide for a second and do a little, I'm going to draw something here. Ask yourself how many rooms, so I'm on the red line here, let me paint with red. So if I can keep my variable costs like this, all on one line, that's great. But let's say I go from a certain occupancy that requires, I'm going to drive business to a point where I've got to hire another housekeeper. Well, now I may have just shifted that variable line. Maybe you decide that you're going to upgrade your breakfast offering and your food cost is going to go up. Then you're going to shift that line. You want to be careful about that. So that might not make sense. But if you say to yourself, okay, all right, self, I'm already here 142 hours a week or whatever it works out to be. All right. What could I be doing to maximize the use of my time? And what can I be paying somebody else to do? And that doesn't necessarily mean housekeeping. What's the best bang for the buck that you get? Because that fixed cost, you're a fixed cost, I'm a fixed cost. I ain't going anywhere. So I need to get every dollar out of me. I need to keep my variable as low as possible. You guys know that, but the message here is every $10,000 after you've crossed your break point, if your fixed costs or if your variable costs, sorry, are 25%, that means every $10,000 is $7,500 into the bottom line, right? And so it may be to your advantage to simply make hay when the sun shines, get that extra revenue, and go back to that chart that I did before. And here's the part that I want to show you that matters. You can do this for yourself, kind of. It might take some time to get the data, but what you want to do is be able to go and say, how does my ADR and occupancy compare? Because we did this exercise a moment ago. We did the math very briefly. I think we said here, if we call this 180 times 25, right? That's 45. And then if we go to the other one, it's going to stay on here, 45 times 140. I'll have to grab a calculator for this. That's 63. In this scenario, in this particular example, I'm actually making more money at a lower rate, more pure dollars. Okay, so if I sold, so I'm at $140 a night and I've got 45% occupancy, I'm making $63 versus the 45. What I want you to take away from this is not those numbers. It doesn't mean lower rate equals higher occupancy. You have to do the math. That doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes the curve plays differently and you're better off higher. It is entirely possible that you can make more money at a higher rate and a lower occupancy, especially if you've got a variable cost piece. If you can do it yourself versus bringing in staff, you might say, I'm going to charge a lot more, not have to hire anybody else, right? Have lower occupancy, less wear and tear on my building, more free time, and at the end of the day, the dollars I'm making are more. So the takeaway here should be, I'm not telling you you should go higher price, lower occupancy, lower price, higher occupancy. I'm saying your property is going to be unique. If you don't know that number, how can you make great decisions? First step is you got to gather that data and get some good reports to get it. Because when you get it, magic can happen. And I'm going to throw one question at you here, and there's still a couple more slides to do, but here's the easiest way to think on this. If you could sell, and I'm going to look at the faces, so I'm going to go back to the screen. If you could sell, you're only allowed to sell one room night a year, but the rate you sold it for was your entire last year's revenue. So if you did 250,000 revenue last year, you've got some, Elon Musk wacko that's willing to pay $250,000 for one night at your place. Is there anybody here who would not take that deal?
Sold.
Right? So there you go. And again, the world would tell you that you're an idiot because your occupancy was 0.1%. It's not that easy. All right. So you got to find the balance between all these items is the key. Let's keep going. I got a couple more here. Well, there you go. Winnie the Pooh helping to tell you to make good decisions. So good data helps good decisions. Fixed versus variable. Oh, okay. Here's a good one. I had a partner who used to say, well, I want to get the nicer sheets for that room. You know, we're going to get comfy sheets in these rooms. It's okay. We'll just charge $2 more a night. It'll pay for it. Complete failure of the demand curve realities, right? It's not how it works. If I charge more, my occupancy will go down unless I shift the curve, right? Donna asked that question. So now if I put the nicer sheets in there and I tell people about it and people go, ooh, I'm willing to pay more for nicer sheets, then yes, that will work. But simply putting the sheets in that room ain't going to do the trick, right? So that's an important nuance. Now, the other place that this comes into is you have to make decisions about renovations and stuff like that around your building, right? A lot of people will do this exercise where they go, okay, it's going to cost me $10,000 to redo that bathroom. And I believe I can get an extra $25 a night, and I sell that room on average 100 nights a year. That's $2,500. That's going to be a 4-year break even. Is that logical and right? Sure. I mean, that's not bad, but who cares? That by itself is not a helpful data point. The helpful data point is when you go, if I do this bathroom, it's going to be a 48-month return on investment. If I do this bathroom, it's going to be a 36-month return on investment. Which bathroom do I do? Now it's an important data point. If you have to do the bathroom because it's just a complete disaster, your hands are tied. But that's where the ROI and thinking about those things really does matter. And I would also say if you don't have your project list, right, that's one worth thinking about. I would also challenge you to say, moving that demand curve, will redoing a bathroom change it? Sure, if people know about it. But yeah, moving that will make things nicer. But instead of comparing, if I do bathroom A versus bathroom B, what if I really mess with you a little bit and say, hey, you know that $10,000 you were willing to spend on a bathroom? What if you spent that on improved marketing activities? How quickly do you think you're going to get your money back on that? What does that look like to redo your website? What does it look like to join associations? What does it look like for you to close in January and go to trade shows and set up a table with your little 5-room B&B and sit there and say, come see me in Ludington, Michigan? Is that so crazy? Maybe, maybe not. But if you only think, if you have that myopic vision of, well, this bathroom is going to be a 4-year return, that's limiting your decisions. Is that, any thoughts on that? All right, let's keep rolling. CPOR, not one that we see a lot of. You probably know what it is, whether you know the acronym or not. Anyone want to venture a guess? CPU, CPOR, cost per occupied room. This is pretty easy. This is your total operational expenses divided by the number of rooms occupied. I will suggest that the operational expenses can be a little squirrely to figure out, and your best bet with CPOR is to just be consistent. So go to your budget, go to your QuickBooks, right, and say, what are my operational expenses? Now, in the industry, because a lot of the industry does disconnect operational from real estate, mortgage is generally not considered this. And if you look at a cap rate, if you're ever getting into real estate investing, you'll see cap rates out there. It also has some unique things that count and don't count. So I would suggest that this isn't as important that you are exactly right about it, because you're probably not going to be an apples to apples with anybody due to the unique nature of what we do. But you should know what your numbers are. So what is the cost per occupied room? So step one, figure out your operational costs. Pretty straightforward. And you get to pick what they are. And then look at your occupied room. So if in, if I had 2,000 rooms and and I've got $200,000 in operational costs, and I had $100 per room, that's my cost per operational room night. Okay. I don't like putting the N on the end of it because then it becomes C porn, and I don't think anybody needs that as an acronym, right? So, does anybody use this? I'm curious.
Done it officially,
Mhm.
but we're you try to make decisions on what your lowest rate should be. Well, how much does it actually cost?
Yep.
And so kind of informally, but I've never heard it called CPOR, and that's pretty cool.
It's kind of the flip side, the whatever you call it, of ADR, right? Because
Yeah.
it does account for occupied rooms, and so it does go up and down based on your occupancy. Here's where it makes sense. I've joined Stash Hotel Rewards. I kind of like what they're doing. If you haven't done it, take a look. And they have an employee rate of $69. Am I losing money? Now, I haven't had anybody stay here on that. We do a friends and family. We do $79 friends and family. Very, very limited scope that we offer that up. What about when you give a donation? What's the value of your donation? Is it what you could sell it for, or what it costs you? So this kind of helps you play around with that. Again, I wouldn't put a lot of time into it, but definitely give it at least a once over and play around with it. And then more importantly, like other things, except if you've added or subtracted rooms, you have to make sure that you're doing an apples to apples there.
Right.
I like pace, but you got to be careful with it. Okay. Jenna booked a really big, she booked a 4-night buyout in October last year. She booked it in February of 2023. So guess what? My pace report looks like junk this year because that's a several $1,000s of revenue that looks like I didn't have. So we're just kind of mentally doing it. Did anybody come from the hotel world, like the good old fashioned hotel world?
No.
Okay. Do any of you on your own volition have the big red diary, the daily diary? Y'all know, have you ever seen one of those?
No.
I will. Okay, so this book, I know we're close at time here, so forgive me. These are actually kind of cool. We've considered doing it ourselves here, and these are part of the National Archives. The New York Public Library has them from the Plaza Hotel back in the 20s. And these daily diary books, first of all, they cost like $80. They're giant, they're oversized books, and they're impressive. And it used to be you would track, right? Here's the rooms and the people, and you would take the registration and you write down all the rates, and then you'd have your daily diary on the right-hand side. And oh, thank God for computers, we've lost this beautiful part of history. Now, I'm not crazy. We're all going to keep using our computers and stuff, but there is one thing that I will encourage you to do. I find it harder and harder as I'm getting older to remember what happened last week, last month. And again, the overarching concept of this session has been empower yourself to make better decisions and be able to provide a better, financial result for yourself. If you don't remember, if you don't note out of ordinary things, then it's going to be hard to know why you are where you are now versus a different point in time. So there may be some wisdom to keeping a diary. How's the weather? Unseasonably warm, lovely day. Unexpected group showed up looking for, lost gold in the mountains of Ludington. Whatever weird stuff is going on, because when you go back, and Jenna and I do this all the time, we'll look at it and be like, God, seems like we're really slow this weekend. How were we last year? Oh, we were really busy. What happened? And then we'll sit there and we'll go, what's going on? Oh, right. We had blah, blah, blah. should we have changed our marketing efforts, or is it a one-off? So if you're not keeping track, you won't know it. So the PACE report, the point of that story is PACE reports data and numbers. It doesn't really tell the whole story. Okay, I think I'm on my second to last slide here. You have those fun glasses you can put on so you can see in 3D? That's what this is. Now, so which one of these cars do you want to buy? The one on the left, I can tell you every appointment it went to, every service record, every oil change, every accident or not, you name it. I can tell you where it was serviced, when it was serviced, what it cost, what was done. The one on the right, I don't have any records for. Which one is more valuable?
One on the right.
The one that you took all the records with.
Yeah, the one with all the records.
The one with the records, right?
Mhm.
He handled that well.
Well, yeah, I don't know which one the one on the right is, but you get my point. The one with the records is going to sell more. The same is true of your business, right? And we have evaluated and purchased and looked. We've probably evaluated close to 200 B&Bs when we were searching. Since we started this in 2014, and I've probably seen the books for about 200 B&Bs. I can't think of one that I was impressed with. I can't think of one B&B in 10 years that I looked at the books and said, these people have done a great job of keeping their maintenance records. Or let me put it in a slightly different way without being so punitive. No seller had books that enhanced the value of their sale.
That's good.
Okay.
Interesting.
No seller in close to 200. I just did one for a place down in Silver Lake. It wasn't a place we were going to buy. It was for somebody else. And they had, that was the one that they had, the broker did all the books for and had all these cap rates and they had everything. And they really put a nice shine on it because they are a commercial real estate broker. And they knew how to, boy, did they put together a 32-page presentation with all the data points and ever. And I'll tell you what, if I didn't know what I was doing, I probably would have been impressed. But as soon as I started scratching the surface, I realized it was all window dressing. It was all BS. And there. But in the B&B world, yeah, nobody has done themselves any favor with it. So when do you start? Now? How do you start? Well, it's actually not that hard. Make sure you have an accurate data on your revenue. Make sure you're being truthful to yourself about your occupancy, right? What is your real occupancy? Are you fudging the numbers? Be able to use ADR the way it should be used, same with RevPAR, to track your own progress. You don't want ADR going up and occupancy going down, right? What is your cost per occupied room? And we're not going to get into it today, but your client acquisition cost or your guest acquisition cost and your client long-term value or your guest long-term value. Those are things that maybe for a future seminar, but what does it cost you to get a new guest compared to a return guest? If it's that much more expensive to get a new guest versus a return guest, what are you doing to incentivize return guests? That's all I've got for you today. I know I went a little bit over, didn't expect to, so I hope it was helpful.
Yes, thank you very,
Yes,
very
very
much,
much, Chris.
Chris. It's been wonderful.
Gary.
Chris, it was wonderful. We're so appreciative. Thank you.
My email is easy. I got in early. I'm csimpler@gmail or csimpler@yahoo, or you can hit one of the infos at Cartier or Ludington House. Donna can always get you in touch with me. Happy to talk more about this stuff. Happy to learn from you if you're doing something that you think would be good here, because I'd love to be able to share this story more. So thank you all.
All
Thanks,
right. Well,
Chris.
thank
Have a
you.
great
Thank
rest of
you
your day.
all.
Thank you.
All right. We'll
Bye.
see you
Bye.
all later. Bye-bye.
Bye.